In the lesson sequence, we have also included Greek and Latin roots. This is more challenging as a task, and it will appear at the very end of the lessons that we have provided. So let's look at the lessons. In the table of contents, you will find roots at the very end. We have Greek and Latin roots, and you see we have classified them as meaning, communication, as action words, people, relationships, measurement, distance, again, because we're trying to show to the students the meaning that is carried behind the roots and how they are functioning in words and what do they mean. Also, we want them to be thinking, what other words come from these roots, especially as we're looking at Greek and Latin roots and how they may be used even in social studies and science. So I will select the first lesson. And again, when I reach the lesson, you will see we have lesson materials, the agenda, the helpful resources on the side for you. And then again, I will have the introduction, the lesson objective. So the teacher will say, today we will work with the roots or base words. Root or base words. We learned about prefixes, suffixes, and how those can be added at the beginning and at the ending of base words and carry meaning that will change the base word. A base word is a word that can stand alone in speech. Oftentimes, base words contain roots that they hold meaning that can help us figure out what the whole word will mean. Roots can come at the beginning, at the end, or in the middle of a word. So, today we will work with bases and roots that carry meaning and practice reading them, spelling them, and thinking about the meaning and the meaning in sentences. We're going to use our strategy. When we see a prefix or a suffix, we will box it by drawing a box around it. Then we will work with a base word. Remember, a syllable needs a vowel. When we have a vowel theme, we'll underline the vowel theme. When we have VCE syllable, we will underline the vowel that says its name, put a dot on the silent E. When we see the consonant E, we'll underline it. When we see compound words, we'll look for the parts. If we see a root that we know the meaning of, we can double underline the root. So that way we can differentiate it in that word. Again, if we can read those parts. If we can't, we need to use our strategy. We should be flexible when working with syllables and read the word with the prefix, the suffix, and the base word. We should be thinking of the meaning of the word when working with a prefix and a suffix and how the meaning of the base word will change. Today, we will be learning roots that have meanings that relate to communication. Communication is all about sending, receiving messages through talking, through listening, through reading, and through writing. The roots we will learn about all have to do with communication. So the root I have first is the root gram. Gram comes from Greek, and it means things that is written, like telegram. Tele means, it's Latin, it means far away. Telegram, it's something that is written, comes from far away. Telegram. The root graph also comes from Greek. I can tell because it has the PH. We said the words that have PH, they derive from Greek. So the root graph comes from Greek and it means writing, like in geography. Geo, earth, geography, writing about the earth. So it's the mapping of the earth, the writing of the earth. The root scrib comes from Latin and it means to write, like in the word prescription, to write a prescription. I go to the doctor to get a prescription. The root dict comes from Latin, means to say, like in the word contradict, to say the opposite that I said before. I contradict myself. The root mit, M-I-T, comes also from Latin, means voice or to call, as in the word vocalize, voca, voice. And finally, I have the root aud that comes from Latin and means to hear, like in the word audience. Audience, the people who hear, the people who listen. Or audio, right, what I hear. Now, we will practice reading words. Watch me. I need to read this word. Oh, I already saw this. I'll use my strategy. I see the root gram. I underlined it as a part. I know that gram means something that's written down. I also know that tele means far, far away, far off. So telegram means a message that's written down and sent from far away. I will underline each vowel if I cannot read that part, right? And then I will read the part. Telegram. Long ago, my grandpa used telegrams to communicate with his family who lived across the country. Now I'm going to continue with another word. Here is the word. This is the word I have. I can recognize the base that has graph. That means to write, and that's my root, right? So I also see that I have the suffix er. That means someone who does the action. So I see also at the front G, which is a prefix. So I have G-O, graph-er, geographer. Geography is the study of maps or written representation. Geographer is the person who studies. So the geographer studied her map and globe very closely. Geographer, the person that studies. As a teacher now, I will continue with the rest of the words, explaining the root, explaining the meaning that the root carries and what happens to that with the inclusion of the prefix and the suffix in that word. After the reading, they will work together with the teacher into collaborative and then in the independent reading of words. Then the teacher will work on the spelling of words using exactly the same language that has been used earlier. So the teacher will say reading and writing are connected. If we can read words, we can figure out how to spell them. If we know syllables, we can also check our spelling. Now that we know suffixes, we can use the knowledge to spell words and better understand their meanings. Again, we also know prefixes and we can utilize our knowledge to read. I want to spell the word programmer. I hear programmer, programmer. I will write pro, which is open. I will write the root gram, program, that I know gram, which I know it means writing, and program. Actually, it has a second M, so it is programmer. If I wrote just ER, it would not be right. That would be pronounced programmer, programmer, right? Because MER will go together. So I'm adding a second M, so I have programmer. So programmer, that means someone who writes computer codes, programs codes, he's writing codes. The programmer fixed the algorithm many times before it worked. And then the teacher will continue with the word auditorium with the same way and same way of working. Finally, they will work on dictation and on the reading of the words. We have provided 2 weeks working on roots and working on and base words. In reality, it's again inclusion of prefixes, suffixes, and roots that they cannot stand on their own and that they need other words in order to function within as a word. This will be challenging for the students, but also it can be a great way of discovering other words. So once they say telegram, they can also say telephone. Oh, tele, far away. Voice that comes from far away. Phone, it has the PH. It comes from Greek. So they can start asking a lot and they can get very engaged and very excited about words. And that's what we want them to be. At the same time, we want them to be flexible because if parts don't work, then they can try another way in order to read the word. And it is important for them to have that flexibility so that they can have flexibility both on the boundaries of how do I break syllables, but also on the way that I will pronounce the vowels and I will overall pronounce the word. So that is the set of putting it all together, but also putting it all together and considering Latin and Greek roots.